Well, I didn't get very far in the Prokofiev 6 second movement last time, and I may not get very far again, but it was fun and it was profitable. I learned something. It starts to stick, and it's very playable. It's a delightful piece. So, anyway, let me see if I can find where I was. I see where the numbers run out. That's a fun. Oh yes, I got 2 full lines in, and then there was this sudden change to B flat. Okay, let's see what happens. That's measure 13, third line in this Boosey and Hawkes edition. Okay, I'm guessing that that low note looks like an octave is a D, but when I'm learning something, I can't quite trust, unless it's something I explicitly know right off the bat. I always want to make sure. So I'm going to count the ledger lines. My reasonably educated guess is that it's a D. D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and it is a D. Just for reinforcement, I'll even write that it's a D. So, but it's not a D, it's a D sharp. That makes it so much easier because he's got a ninth here. It's 2 D sharps and an E. And had it been 2 Ds and an E flat, it would have been much more uncomfortable. So let's see what's going on here. When I get to B flat, that's interesting. That's the low voice in the right hand. Mostly B flats in the middle voice. Now the bottom note moves. Oh no, no E flat. Okay. Changes fingering, certainly the sonority changes. Well, here's one weird example of fingering and sensation. This is written as F sharp, B flat, and E natural. So it's a pile of fourths. However, it feels very much like a major third, 2 black notes, plus a tritone. So I'm going to finger it as 5-2-1 or 1-2-5. Feels very good, but the feeling I have under my hand doesn't feel anything like the way the chord looks. Does that make sense? I think you get it. But in any event, by going to the sensation rather than to what visually it looks like, I can nail it. So here it's just all 1-3-5s. I'll stick in a 4 for C sharp. Now the thumb moves down, stick with my 5-3s on top, and back up, and then at E natural, which probably merits a reminder, is what makes 1-2-5 work so well. Okay. This pivots around the B flat, that's stationary, and finally the B flat gives way to B natural. Okay. I can't yet make total sense out of that. I can. The beginning makes perfect sense, but here the stridency of that D sharp is quite considerable. This is E major. And then okay, we have here sounds like F minor, but it isn't. It is E sharp minor. So because it's E sharp minor, it's very difficult to read. If it were F minor, it would be very easy to read. Keeps you humble. So here I have an augmented chord. So again, the look of the chord, 13, 14, 15, the last chord of 16 looks like a third plus a fourth. It's one of the ways of spelling out an augmented chord, but I have to decide what fingering fits it best. I can go from 5-4-2 to 5-3-1 to 5-2-1, which is rather compressed, but then I'm just going to open up by one note. So I'm going to choose instead fourth finger on this augmented chord. Makes me find this, I'll call it F minor chord, much more easily. Okay, I'm even going to write F minor just so I know what it is when I'm in a hurry. And 4 to 5, that also helps me both with reading and with an understanding of its melodic intent, because then the E goes up to E sharp or to F. The harmony stays the same. Sorry. No, it doesn't. Well, no. Okay. What's happening, of course, is that the melody, the melody at the beginning, it was already harmonized. Here it's harmonized differently, and it's hidden rather better. Let's see, if I can. He's altered that. Well, it's certainly not in the upper voice. Let's see what happened to it. It's gone. So this snippet from the second phrase. A minor chord turns into it. Well, it's still a minor chord. How about that? Careful, because this is E sharp, because of an E sharp previous. It's just not in the same voice, but because these are chords, none of that rule about notation, about the accidental having to be in the same voice as it would be saying Bach. So there's an E sharp, so the E sharp recurs. So I have. I think those intervals are identical. Let's check. Minor, descending major third. Let's see. Yes. Falling fifth, falling sixth. Okay, so it's just transposed. The first part is not present, which is what makes it interesting. It sort of degrades and then refines its identity. So I'm going to just write thematic. I could write anything fancier than that. I just want to be aware at what point it happens. because oral reinforcement alone is not going to help me unless I really, really know this piece well already, which I don't. So I think that a major 7. And a diminished octave. F minor again, just because it'll aid in grabbing it quickly. And I have here an F sharp major, and then an F minor. So that's helpful. The same thing. It's a third lower. It's so much harder to read than it will be hard to play, which is why it's important to get the reading out of the way and preferably translate it into things that make it more fluid and more comfortable. So here we have these first inversion chords. An uncomplicated thing can be. Let's see. The left hand just jumps around a bit. 5-1, 5-1, that's an obvious one for a series of octaves. Now, go 5-4-3-2. I've got all the black notes in a row. But then I have one finger too few. So I could choose to just go to 5th twice, 4 twice. I don't think there's any convenient way to turn the hand over. It's more convenient just to repeat a finger, I think. Naturally comfortable at first. In other words, 5 on a white note, 4-3-2, 4-3-2, 1 on black notes, and then I'll just move my hand over. Probably with a finger substitution for I have a whole note on 19-20. 20. So I'd rather get to it with a decent fingering for getting to it. I'm going to change my fingering because it's held for 4 counts, or two large counts, and then the top part of the hand comes in. Okay, then I have the same kind of issue. I've got a held note, the G sharp. So I haven't yet investigated the right hand here, but I think the finger substitution is in order. Fingers. Well, I may want to split the difference. In other words, I may want to shift to 4th finger initially. It's easier to grip the G sharp when I make a quickie shift. shift to fifth. I need 3, because my head has to turn over to get to the E, the A rather. The white note here, back to that stuff. Interesting shenanigans here. So I'm going to notate that. 1, 3 going to 4, then going to 5. And then second finger on the first G sharp. This is interesting. On measure 22, there's a G sharp with a turn figure around it, so it's all chromatic. And back to this figure. Then I'm going to 3 because it helps me to get to the A thumb, so that's very useful. Back to the substitution. Standard, simple chromatic. Okay, that's a lot of left hand, but it was intriguingly challenging as compared with some of the other stuff in here. So let me go back to the D flat chord, measure 13. Let's see. Nice about that. You always want to identify patterns that help you to remember how the coordination works, so you both have a mental grip on it and a feel for it once it becomes fluid. So the bass is moving up in hybrid fashion, namely it's somewhat chromatic and somewhat not chromatic. Or it could be the equivalent of an E flat major ending, last 5 notes. So that's fine. Meanwhile, the thumb line of the right hand, along with the static chords, that's going in contrary motion with the left hand, but it's chromatic. So that's, once I know that, whoops, I'm showing off, and you know what happens. You fall off your mic. So now it's easy enough. It's amazing. Once I've told myself that, in other words, I want to repeat what I said in the previous section. When you know it, it's memorized. You don't have to impose memory on it. If you understand the nature of it, the nature of the sensation, the nature of the sound, and most particularly the idiomatic nature of it. The idioms, by definition, when you use them in speech, do not fall apart. You don't parse them, you don't take them apart. My favorite one being, it's used in English a lot, how do you do? Because it's a nonsensical question. And it's answered with a mirror of itself, or an echo. You say, how do you do? Which is presumably a question mark, and the other person says, how do you do? And nobody gets an answer. So that's a perfect example of an idiom, or how do you do what? There's no object to what you do. All of those mean it would be a nonsensical expression if you tried to pull it apart and understand it. You don't want to go how and do and you, etc. And you don't want these things to sound the way they sounded when I was just reading them for notes. You want them to sound like that. You want them to have a sense of shape. And then I get, of course, once I'm in complete command, I can choose to voice it in accordance with what makes it interesting. For example, I want the thumb line to really be present, and I can choose to do that, but only when I am comfortable enough overall to feel in command of those choices. Okay, so I know that I'm feeling good. This is a good thing. In my fingering. Okay, I think second finger will do just fine because I have 4 notes leading to the 5th finger, so that works. I have to remember the 4th finger I chose to play in the right hand to get me to this pseudo F minor chord. Mentioned when I was working previously on chamber music of Beethoven and Schumann that sometimes when something is non-legato, and of course this is a series of chords that has to be non-legato, and Prokofiev has added dots to it too, but the risk is when you concentrate on the articulation too much, it's too vertical in your relationship to the keyboard, and every note, or in this case every chord, gets to be isolated from all the others, and the result is you don't have a choreography that tends to get you from place to place, which is what destroys idiomatic flowing gesture. So I try to make these longer than they are indicated, initially at least, to give me a finer sense of how I get from place to place. For example, excuse me, on this flat chord. Doesn't remotely look like an A flat chord, but it grabs like an A flat chord and it sounds like an A flat chord. So the sensation of that grabbing with the 2 long fingers on black notes, going into the keyboard to the thumb on black note, that demands a certain commitment to moving into the keyboard. So if I have that in hand, pardon the pun, it wasn't intentional, but I take full responsibility for it. So I have these belong together, these belong together, and that helps to create an idiomatic gesture, which is lots of fun to find. That's a big one. It's not so big, please. I take it back. I have to just be in the right note. All right. Surprised by the left hand. I can do it when I'm reading it. I can notice the fact that there's a double G sharp, but I need to make more sense with it when I'm coordinating with the right hand. So the right hand has obvious 2-note groupings. Back to the G sharp is part of the melody. The left hand is going to support it by getting to the low G sharp and then starting again from it. Left hand is supporting a really more exotic, much more florid right hand. It's the first time the right hand stops playing these incessant quarter notes. So we get to this G sharp chord, G sharp major chord, or A flat chord. 7th. 1, 5, 4, 3 seems perfectly fine. I'm less enamored of how I have to shift from what he calls B sharp to B. So I could go 1, 5, 1, 4, 1, 3. I could even go 1, 2, which has the singular advantage of keeping me out of trouble and not make the delivery of the thumb to the B so hard. So in other words, I'm not sure I will do it, but it makes the thumb right there and sets me up for what's later. I may split the difference, maybe play a third. I think so. Somewhat arbitrary, but I like my rationale. So, whoa, and I misread it, so good thing I caught it. That may change things. Just going to note that to myself. See, the note to self in this case is a literal, has a literal manifestation, because I wrote a note to myself on the note in it. All right. Now, the fingering is fine. I could do the 4, it'll grab that. Let's see if. Not bad. You know what? The body wins. 4th finger, it says, try 4th finger. It actually makes my note recollection more accurate. In other words, 4 and 3 being partners along with 2. The black note fingers, shall we call them, feel much better than 5, 4, 3, especially because of 2 reasons. 5 and 4 don't partner well on 2 black notes. They partner better white to black. And then, 3rd finger, the longest finger, certainly doesn't want to be on a white note when its partner 4 is on a black note. So that's a reversal of the norm. So 4, 3, 2, at least 2 is shorter than 3. And if someone has to be on a white note, it's going to be 2. That's it. So that's well optimized. But I'm still playing the wrong notes. There we go. Okay, so it's 1 and 3. I didn't need to write that because I've run out of fingers. And that's pretty logical that that's what I would do. But for good practice. Good practice in practicing. I'm going to write it down. The second time for measure 23, if I do finish the same way, if I finger it exactly the same way, then I'm going to run out of fingers. So I really, really want thumb on E in measure 24. Let's see how I can get there. I'll work my way back upwards. I'm going to assume that I had thumb still on C. It's the easy. I'm just going to turn to 4 instead of to 3 on B. And now, very often when you have the same notes, you want to have the same fingering for consistency, but the advantage here is by having one changed finger, 4th instead of 3, it signals my body, my mind, it's going to continue in a different fashion. It works out perfectly, so I have it. Let's see. Now, I do have fancy stuff. So if you haven't been following all these tapes, and I can't imagine anyone would follow all of them, I probably repeat myself fairly regularly because the lessons I learn happen in different circumstances. But if you happen to have just started with some of the Prokofiev sonata, I'm a big fan of what I call the principle of layered complexity, that complexity results from taking a bunch of simplicities and piling them on top of one another, layering them. And the easiest way to get rid of that sense of overwhelming complexity is to strip off as many layers as you need. The simplest version that most young pianists know about is practicing hands separately, because you're able to say, oh, I've conquered this, I've conquered that, and then I'll put it together. You never know what you have to pull apart. In other words, there may be a rhythm, like for someone who has difficulty with 2 against 3 or 4 against 3 or something like that, and that's compounded by having a lot of counterpoint. You have to decide, do I work on the rhythm first, do I work on the counterpoint first? In this case, the left hand has at least I've chosen to have it do a lot of shifty finger substitutions. Now that's all the while the right hand is doing that. Luckily, as I just experienced, did you hear when I was trying to layer the complexity, in other words, talk to you and play at the same time, there was a wavering in how I played, but I think I'm going to start to do it better. So let me see if I know it well enough. I can kind of talk while playing it. So I can play it by feel. I don't need to look at the keyboard. That's an advantage to me, because if I can talk to you, that likely means that when I add my left hand, which I know at least initially is going to need a fair amount of attention, as you could see, I couldn't do that without staring at the music. So if I know that I trust my right hand, then it can sort of mind its own business. It can go on autopilot. There we go. Not great, but at least I've constructed a coordinated gesture. So I've mentioned the rhythm of finger substitution. Here I really need 1, 2, 3. Stopping place. I just want to work out the intriguing aspects of the right hand. It's playing a chromatic scale up to C, but it adds chords just to keep things interesting. Now, the hands are close together. Prokofiev has written the chords always in the right hand, and he may be right, but I've got to find out if he is right. It seems pretty obvious to me that Prokofiev composed that at the piano, or tried that at the piano. This is not the sort of thing that you just put down and then say, oh, everyone struggled through it. There are composers who will do that, but Prokofiev had to play his own stuff. Had to know it was playable, so I'm just following through on whatever fingers are there. That didn't work. So I'm going to put little discoveries. 3. Initially I went 3, 4, 5. There's a measure 4, 5, 6. Okay, I definitely, on the turn of the page, 24, 25, 26, page on 27, F, A flat, E. I think I want 1, 2, 5. It certainly is comfortable. Let's see. Yeah. Then 4 is the transition fingering. 1. Okay, all of that can be done going 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Nice. Excellent. let's see about this. You notice I'm playing it too fast. Well, not too fast for what I can play. I'm playing it too fast for the piece, I think, right now. Because I want to know that when I'm being relatively carefree, it'll still serve me. Yeah, and it is. So I'm, let's see, 3, 3, 5, 5. Isn't that nice? Okay, I'm going to stop here.